Hello, hello. Welcome to the Put Your Mask On First Burnout Prevention Impacts on the Provider and Tools to Manage CEU portion of CARE4U2 2024. My name is Jessica Doan. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I work here at Resolve as a clinician and also as our Director of Community Engagement. So with community engagement, I do a lot of our business development, partnerships, education for community members and other businesses and agencies, as well as organize all of our community givebacks and events. Thank you for being here. We're really excited to share with you some topics that our team felt were relevant and needed to discuss and needed to have some information about. And one of them is burnout prevention. This is something I'm incredibly passionate about as a clinician and as a human being. I just want to start us out by reminding you that there is a lot of shame and stigma about burnout within our field. There is oftentimes the thought process that in order to be good at being a therapist or a mental health provider, you have to always be good yourself. And that's not real life. And I'm hopeful that throughout this presentation, you can learn some things to look out for in yourself and others, but also you can learn to give yourself a little bit of freaking grace and compassion because we do really hard work, and doing hard work is not sustainable when you feel like you're drowning and you're not acknowledging that you're drowning. So again, thank you for being here. I'm stoked to get into it. So the objectives for our presentation, we're going to create an understanding of what burnout actually is. This is a word that gets thrown around a lot. And again, it's either something that we're talking about all of the time or not at all. There doesn't seem to be just like a middle ground of I'm getting to burnout. What do I do? It's more so oh shoot, I'm not addressing this until it's already blown up and happening. So I'm hopeful that you'll also learn throughout understanding the differences between burnout stress and compassion fatigue, that you will be able to help yourself identify what stage of burnout you may be in. We're also going to look at how burnout and the behaviors associated with burnout can impact the clinician, the client, and the client care that they are receiving. We're going to have time for a self-assessment. So again, I am asking you to be a little vulnerable with yourself throughout this presentation and come at this topic with curiosity instead of judgment towards yourself. If you are experiencing symptoms that I'm talking about today, you're not a failure. You haven't done it wrong. You don't need to quit your job, but you do need to get support. And I'm going to help you get some ideas on what you can do to recover from burnout and then also what you can do to prevent it in the future. I love starting with a quote. This is how I start almost every presentation. This particular quote is from one of my favorite books. This is the book called Trauma Stewardship. It is an everyday guide to caring for self while caring for others. And this is by Laura Van Der Noot Lipsky with Connie Burke in a foreword by John R. Conti, a PhD. I am sure I just butchered every single name on this book, but Google it. This is what it looks like. So the quote I'd like to share with you from this book is, if we are to do our work with suffering people and environments in a sustainable way, we must understand how our work affects us. We need to undertake an honest assessment of how our feelings or behaviors have changed in response to whatever trauma we have been exposed to. Something really important within this quote is just acknowledgement that we do experience vicarious trauma within the work that we do. And vicarious trauma is incredibly real. It is not something that you need to dismiss because it wasn't your own lived experience. The fact of the matter is that on a regular basis, those of us working in mental health, therapy, any kind of healing or helping profession, we are holding space for the good, the bad, the negative, the positive, the in-betweens, the unknowns, the stress, the celebrations. We are holding space for all of it. Whether we are holding space for a recent trauma of someone that we're working with or a past trauma, all of these things add up and they are heavy and they get heavy, and that is normal. Ignoring the fact that this stuff is heavy is not going to help you prevent burnout. In fact, it's likely going to make it happen so that burnout sneaks up on you when you're not expecting it. And really, one of the main goals or takeaways I hope that you get from this presentation is we can be proactive about our burnout, but in order to do that, we have to acknowledge what happens when we start feeling it, instead of ignoring it, pushing it down, pretending like it's not a thing. So keep that in mind as we move forward. So let's start out with our basic definition of burnout. This comes from the World Health Organization, which is the industry standard in a lot of fields, specifically medicine and other human service fields. So the way that WHO defines burnout is an occupational phenomenon conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. I really want us to pay attention to phenomenon, chronic, and not successfully managed. Those things are going to come back later. So burnout has historically and still been categorized into three different subjects or dimensions. There are several burnout assessment tools out there. One of them is the one referred to here. Another name I will butcher, but I'm going to say it's Mashlock. In 1982, this categorization really started, and there is a assessment tool created with these three dimensions. We're going to talk more about assessment tools later on in the presentation, but I do think it's interesting that this has been something that has been researched and explored since the 80s. This is not new. So the three dimensions, we've got sustained feelings of emotional exhaustion, such as loss of energy, depletion, overextension, fatigue, just dragging, constantly tired. This is the Red Bull coffee extraordinaires in your life. The next dimension is depersonalization. This is that withdrawal behavior, increased mental distance from your job, feelings of cynicism related to your job. So this may look like not thinking about work ever, even if you have a lot of things that you should be thinking about or you should be prioritizing or working on. It's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. I'm not related to that until I have to be. This also may sound like a lot of cynicism towards your job, who you work for, who you work with. My job sucks. This is horrible. This is never going to get better, et cetera, et cetera. A side note about that, this can often really create a negative morale within an agency or a work environment if there is a lot of this cynical thoughts and feelings about the work that you're doing or the people that you're working for or with. And that is like a domino effect. And it can really impact the entire agency or the entire group of people that you're working with. And so those of us, when you're in a space of not being in that depersonalization realm, this can feel really, really heavy to be surrounded by coworkers or folks that you work for or with that have this viewpoint that things are never going to get better. That can make it feel incredibly challenging to get out of burnout. And then the last one is professional inefficacy, which we're describing here as reduced feelings of accomplishment or productivity and an increase in distractibility. As you can probably see here, these three things go together. So it can be a combination of all three dimensions that someone is experiencing. It can be that one leads to the next. So oftentimes if you're feeling this first dimension of feeling emotionally exhausted, you then may start withdrawing because you don't have the capacity. You then may start making mistakes or feeling like you're not doing your work correctly because you're too distracted and not able to be present and focused. And that makes sense. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the differences between stress, burnout, and compassion fatigue. Um, I really like to view these almost like a Venn diagram where there is overlap between all three of these things, and many, many of us in this work have experienced all three at varying levels at the same time, at different times, etc. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about stress. When we think about stress, we think about big, right? We think of over engagement and overreactive. So when someone is feeling or experiencing stress, they've got this sense of urgency. They are just incredibly reactive. Everything is a reaction. We're not able to be proactive because we are too stressed. Those things, probably no shock to anyone, lead to a lack of energy. You're using all of your energy on being stressed. So then your capacity, which is already small, is smaller because you are draining your energy by being overreactive, overengaged, and having that extreme sense of urgency. Um, all of these then lead for some to anxiety, which, go figure, drains more of our energy. And that anxiety can manifest as an obsession. What I mean by that is some obsessive behaviors of triple checking your work email, making sure that you've crossed everything off your to-do list, feeling like you're forgetting something, thinking about work outside of work all of the time. These things lead to stress, and this is how we can describe stress for the purpose of this presentation. In comparison, you've got burnout. Burnout here is described as disengagement. So back to that dimension number 2 from the slide before, that depersonalization. I'm withdrawing, I'm disengaged, I have blunted emotions, I'm not myself. I am pretty robotic, closed off, not thriving, just surviving. You may have a sense of helplessness. If we go back to that cynicism from the slide before, of course, you're feeling hopeless if you're feeling like things are never going to get better. If you're having trouble seeing the light at the end of the tunnel because your burnout has gotten too loud. Leading to lack of motivation. Why would I feel motivated when I don't think things are ever going to change? Why would I want to keep pouring my heart and soul into this work if I don't feel like I'm going to feel differently? Which then leads to depression. Now I'm feeling depressed because this is what I sought out to do. And can I do it if I feel like this all of the time? And then we may start detaching from our career, from our identity within the mental health field, from our coworkers, our job, people in our personal lives, etc. I also just want to make space for a hot second that burnout is not the whole truth. So when you're experiencing burnout and you're experiencing these feelings and you're having these thoughts of things are never going to get better, am I actually in the right field for myself? Do I need to find something different to do with my life? I just went to college for a million years and now I don't know if I can hang in this work forever. That is a very normal and natural response to burnout. And it's not the whole story. It's not the whole story because there are so many things that make this work worth it. And one of the things that I will always recommend is pouring into prevention when it comes to burnout and compassion fatigue, because we all have a why. We all have a reason as to why we're in the field doing the work that we're doing. And being able to hold just a pause for, I am feeling burnt out right now. It feels like everything is awful and terrible and is never going to get better. but I need to remind myself that it's been better before and it can be better again. And I can make changes. I can find things that I do have power and control over to help me reduce my feelings of burnout or recover from it. And again, at the end of the presentation, I'll talk through some tools for burnout recovery and prevention. And then the last one here I want to talk about is compassion fatigue. This has two different definitions here on this visual. You've got the emotional withdrawal accompanied by mental and physical exhaustion after caring for sick or traumatized people over time. Or it also may show up as apathy or indifference toward the suffering of others after overexposure to tragedy and pain. Both of these are very, very understandable responses to the work that we do. These are oftentimes showing up in signs in this purple box here. So blaming others for their own suffering. This is that cynicism again. This is my job sucks, my employer sucks, our whatever insurance sucks, all of these things suck. And I am just going to hate my life and hate my job forever. That is quite a large projection there. Again, when you're in compassion fatigue, you're in burnout, you're feeling stressed, it is so much easier to project than it is to pause and try to reroute. That is human behavior. And it's a really good warning sign that you may need to assess what's going on for you internally. Complaining about your life or your work. This is the person that is just every time you talk to them, it is how everything is horrible and everything is too much and I am too tired and everyone needs too much from me, excuse me. The other thing to keep in mind here is that you can experience compassion fatigue in your personal life as well. So, as well as burnout. So there are absolutely times that we experience compassion fatigue and burnout with our loved ones, with our children. Being a caregiver and working in mental health, that's a lot. That requires so much energy. And it makes sense that if you're not intentionally pouring back into yourself or trying to be intentional with prevention of burnout, prevention of compassion fatigue, it makes sense that it sneaks up. Poor self-care. We'll talk about that later on as well. This is not just, I'm not going out of my way for extra self-care. This is more so, I'm not showering. I'm not brushing my teeth. I'm not taking my meds. I'm not going for walks like I like to. I am not doing the things that are required and necessary for me as a human being to feel good and alive. You may experience stress, which go back to that Venn diagram I was talking about earlier. These two are an overlap. Muscle tension, physical symptoms are actually incredibly common with burnout, stress, and compassion fatigue. This is something that I'm not sure we talk about enough. The somatic symptoms of stress, burnout, and compassion fatigue may come up as headaches or migraines or inability to fall asleep or stay asleep, insomnia, night terrors, stomach problems, lack of appetite, nausea, headaches, and migraines. I maybe already said that, but I think you get the drift that there are quite a few physical symptoms. Our lab work could be impacted by these things. Our blood pressure, there's just a lot that ties, it's all connected. It is all connected. And so it's really important that we don't dismiss those somatic experiences and we dig a little bit deeper when they show up. I am so quick to be like, oh, another headache, cool. I'm probably just dehydrated, which yes, I probably am dehydrated, which is a lack of self-care. But I don't normally automatically look into it as something further. If you start noticing a pattern with those somatic symptoms, please don't dismiss them because that is your body trying to warn you that something's not good, something's not right. And this is also a reminder that taking care of your body and your health is absolutely a part of being a human being. You are deserving of finding space and time to care for your body, to go to the doctor, to take your meds, to take your vitamins, to get fresh air, to drink water. All of those things aren't things you need to earn. Those are things that you just deserve. So please take care of yourself. Um, you may notice yourself exploring escapism. This can come through video games, books, binge watching TV, doom scrolling, rotting in bed, etc. There's a time and place for escapism. Don't get me wrong. There is definitely a time and place when escapism is going to feel like the only thing that you can do in that moment to pour into yourself because you are out of energy, and that is understandable. When this becomes a daily or a regular event, that is, again, that flash of, uh-oh, look out, what's happening? Why am I not able or interested in being present in my real life to the point that all I want to do is play Stardew Valley or whatever video game you play? Pay attention. You're going to get sick of me saying that. We are so used to, as helpers and caretakers, paying attention to everyone else. I bet you if you have kids, you can tell me what every single noise they make means. You can tell when they're upset, when they need space, when they're hungry, when they're tired, because you pay attention. Do you pay attention to yourself in the same way? Probably not. And so, in order to get ahead of these things, you've really got to tune into you. And I know that that is asking kind of a lot of those of us balancing so many things. And the title of the presentation is Put Your Mask On First. You cannot continue to be everything to everyone in your personal and professional life if you're not breathing. All right, all right. Struggling to concentrate, overeating, insomnia, and bottling up your emotions. I have heard people describe this as, I feel like a shell of myself. That feeling is a huge indicator to pause, reflect, look inward, ask for help. You do not have to be in these feelings alone. And again, I understand that there is some shame associated with getting to this point. You are not the only one that has experienced it. Believe me. So next, I want to talk about some contributing factors to burnout in the mental health field specifically. This is not an all-inclusive list by any means. There are a variety of things that can contribute to burnout in our field. Some of the examples or things that likely are the most common for folks watching this is perception of job control and autonomy. You feel like you don't have control over your job, over the expectations, over your schedule, your autonomy, what you do, what you don't do. That can lead to burnout, constantly feeling like other people are making decisions for you. That doesn't feel good. Also, notice the word perception. That does not mean that you are wrong. What that means is, again, like what I was talking about earlier, there is likely another truth in addition to your truth. How can we make space for both? The truth of what control you actually do have in your job versus what you don't. Believe me, I wish we all had 100% control and autonomy. And I don't know if that's how society works yet. Maybe someday. The next one is the nature of your caseload. If you are working with high acuity clients all day and that is it, you are way more susceptible for burnout. And that isn't like a call out for those of you that are in that type of environment. It is just a huge factor to consider. If you are working in foster care or child protective services, inpatient, if you are working with abuse and neglect, sexual assault, truthfully anything, if I'm being honest, if you have folks that are in active crisis all of the time, you are likely going to experience burnout faster and more often than your peers. That does not mean that the work that you're doing isn't something you can keep doing. Many of us that do crisis work love it. It is a matter of realizing that we may have to have different boundaries for ourselves dependent on the type of caseload or work that we are doing. Countertransference reactions. There are times that our clients are dealing with things that may hit very close to home. This is normal. This is real because, again, as the theme of the conference, you are a human and have been long before you were a helper. So the expectation that you're never going to have countertransference is super unfair to you as a provider and someone working in this field, because that would insinuate that you are supposed to just forget all of your own I'm going to skip a bullet here, but all of your own mental health and trauma history, right? So, your own mental health, how you're doing, if you're struggling with chronic mental health. Again, many of us are in the field for a reason. We get it. It is not uncommon for therapists and mental health providers to struggle with their own stuff, to have their own trauma and their own trauma narrative and their own triggers. These things are going to come up, and not addressing it or not having tools ahead of time or even after the fact for debriefing can lead to burnout. Supervisory and agency support, not feeling like you have support from your supervisor, not feeling like you have support from your agency, not feeling like your values align, etc., not feeling safe to talk about things, ask for help, so on and so forth. Not having a supervisor that you feel like really sees you and your value, or even a supervisor that's just never around. Especially when you're new in the field, having access to supervision is a huge thing. It is a requirement for a reason, and not having that readily available for someone who's more green in the field can be incredibly stress producing, which can lead to burnout. Lack of agency resources. We know that government resources in general are sparse for many areas. We know that working in the inner city, you're likely going to have less resources. Sometimes working for schools, it really just depends on your environment and your location. But not having access to the resources that you need as a clinician is super challenging, but then also working with clients that are constantly not having their needs met is a different kind of stress. I did not realize this as a provider until I went from working in inner city. I've worked corrections, I've worked in schools in the inner city, I have ran PHP and IOP groups, I have worked at one of the safety net hospitals in Kansas City. I've worked with a lot of crises. And what I didn't understand until I came to private practice at Resolve is that my clients and my caseload not having their basic needs met means that I am constantly putting out fires and doing brief solution focused work. And that's because my clients were not in a place to be able to move into deeper work, trauma processing, skill building, because they didn't have stabilization within their basic needs. This is huge. And continuing to work in a population or in environments without resources is very taxing. And it also can really lead to a lot of resentment of the system, of our environment. And it can also lead to that hopelessness feeling. Again, all of these bullet points are valid. Like, it makes sense why these things are contributing factors to burnout. And as you're noticing, many of these can't be avoided. And that's why we have to talk about preventative work. Feeling there is no slowing down. The demand to perform is constant. Productivity is a number that comes up, and many people feel as if that demand is ever turning. And what really is very true about that is that there are forever going to be people that need help. There are forever going to be people experiencing trauma. There are forever going to be people wanting to heal and grow from past pain points. That is why the demand will always exist. And it is challenging because we are only one person. And sometimes it can feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. And that's an incredibly, incredibly challenging feeling to hold space for without exhausting yourself. Being in unsafe work environments, not feeling like you can go to work and leave work safely every day, not knowing what you're going to walk into. Some folks are attacked at their jobs depending on the work that they're doing. Some folks are experiencing in real time a trauma that is incredibly, incredibly hard to be a part of. And you may feel unsafe in situations, again, dependent on how you work, like the type of work that you do. And flexible work schedules, not being able to feel like you can prioritize things outside of work when you need to, such as your health or your family. Um, Imposter syndrome and length of time in the field. I added these in here because constantly being down on yourself that you're not doing it right or not doing it good enough or not getting better or whatever negative thought your brain is telling you, whatever should statement is happening. I should know this. I should be able to do this. I shouldn't have to ask for help with this. Those things lead to burnout. And imposter syndrome exists for all of us. Like, let's be super transparent. Every human I know, not even just in mental health, has experienced the feeling and sensation of imposter syndrome. However, it definitely impacts our stress levels and our burnout levels in response to, because we are never feeling like we're doing our job correctly or that we are worthy and deserving of having the job that we have. Your brain is actively adding to your susceptibility to burnout when you are a jerk to yourself about these things. I highly recommend that everyone in the field, but especially those new in the field, specifically if you are doing therapy for the first time as a provider, please get yourself a provider. A therapist that specifically works with therapists is incredibly important because they can help you call out those thoughts in your brain, and they can see through your mask and your shield and your I'm fines, which, by the way, is a fantastic thing for our growth and healing. And it's also very hard. um, 10 out of 10, though, always recommend having your own personal therapist to help with some of these things. So the next step here is, am I experiencing burnout? Is this happening to me? We're going to step into a couple of different approaches for self-assessment. So the first thing I want you to do is pause this video and read through these questions. I want you to be really intentional about how you answer these. Be truthful. Don't fool yourself. There's no need. You also don't have to report these answers to anyone else but yourself. We are doing this to gather information so that we know how to better support ourselves moving forward, so that this work can continue to be sustainable. I am going to, like I said, encourage you to pause this video. You have two options here. You can read through these questions on the screen if you want just like a very short, not in-depth version of the assessment, or you can click the link in the bio of this video for a more in-depth self-assessment, which is called the Professional Quality of Life Scale. If you have never looked at this tool, I highly recommend that you do, even if you don't have time to complete it for yourself right now. I definitely recommend that you do at some point in time. It looks at burnout, compassion, satisfaction, and secondary traumatic stress. So it is comparing a bunch of different things. I really appreciate that it compares compassion satisfaction, which means how much joy and satisfying feelings am I getting from the compassion that I am pouring out. So we are going to pause for a moment and come right back, and then we will continue. So pause your video. All right, welcome back. Um, I hope that that was an experience for you that felt insightful and felt, truthfully, it probably felt hard. And I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge that because it is hard to answer yes to some of these questions. So thank you for taking the time for yourself to begin the assessment process so we know again how to support you next. This here is one of my favorite tools and resources to use. This is called the 12 stages of burnout. When I first saw this image, my mind was blown. That is because I thought that I knew how to find burnout within myself and others. And it wasn't until I saw this that I realized that oftentimes I'm not noticing my symptoms of burnout until I'm in the yellow. So until I am in stage 9. That is concerning. How can I be proactive about my burnout if I'm not acknowledging it's happening until I am in the heat of it? So when we start at stage 1, um, side note, you may or may not experience every stage. You may skip stages. You may bounce back and forth between stages. You may not go in order of stages. All of that is fine and fair. It is just helpful to see the progression. So, stage 1, you feel there is a strong need to prove yourself. It's that imposter syndrome I mentioned before. You're constantly feeling like you're not doing enough, you're not good enough, no one believes you, etc. Stage 2, you keep working harder and harder to prove that you're good enough. You are an overachiever, you are doing more, taking on more things, juggling more things to prove that you can handle it. Stage 3, you begin to neglect your own needs more. You start taking on more, and as your capacity dwindles, so does your self-care. Stage 4, you're conflicted and blame others or the situation. You're like, I like all of these new tasks that I took on, and I don't know that I have the energy to do all of them. I'm mad, and I'm going to blame the fact that we have 40-hour work week in America. That's a silly example. Stage 5, you change your values to focus on work more. This is really important. Take a second if when you read that word values, take a second to identify what yours truly are. So for example, you might value closeness, laughter, adventure, intelligence, compassion, honesty, relationships. None of that was directly about work. Of course, those things show up in our work. And stage 5 would look like my values are productivity, achievement, being able to do everything for everyone all of the time, um, perfectionism. He takes one to know one. That's why I made that face. And that's a really big warning sign when you are starting to prioritize work over the other things in your life that bring you joy. Because the reminder is that we work to live. That is why we work. Obviously, we love what we do. Many, 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 many things about what we do. My work absolutely enriches my life. And my work is not my life. That reminder is really helpful when you're in this phase. Stage 6, you deny the problems that arise due to work stress. So um, again, you're neglecting your own needs and you're not connecting the fact that you're neglecting your needs because of work. You're in denial. You're like, yeah, nothing about work is causing issues for me. I'm fine. I'm doing everything well. I'm okay. You're not. You're lying. Stage 7, you withdraw from your social life and your family sometimes as well. So you no longer have the energy to do things after work or on the weekends because you're pouring so much of yourself into your job. It is not a bad thing to pour yourself into your work. It is not a bad thing to prioritize work. Um, the thing that is dangerous is when there is not a balance or when work takes precedent over anything else. That leads us to stage 8. Your behavior changes, which upsets your loved ones. You are maybe less reliable. You're canceling plans more often. You're much quicker to be defensive or grumpy. You are isolating and withdrawing. You are projecting and taking things out on others. This is when I think people start realizing for themselves that something's not right, is when other people begin to point out the behaviors which are a response to the burnout. So in stage 8, you are being shown, you are being told, you are being exposed to the behaviors that you are exhibiting through the perspective of a loved one. You haven't necessarily connected the dots yet that this is related to burnout. Stage 9, depersonalization happens. You don't feel like yourself. And then you're like, oh, okay, I'm neglecting my needs. I'm not spending time with the people I love. The people that I am spending time with are saying that I'm acting in ways that are hurtful and harmful to them. Who even am I right now? Stage 10, now you feel empty and totally numb. You feel in autopilot, you are checked out, your brain is mashed potatoes. That's what I like to say when I get in this space. And nothing makes you react positive or negative over or under reactions. You are just numb. This is where many folks may see an increase in substance use or abuse because we're looking for ways to numb. We're looking for ways to pause. You are feeling like the world is spinning and there's so much needed from you that you need any way to escape. Stage 11, you now are feeling depressed, lost, and completely exhausted. In this stage, you are feeling hopeless. You are like, I am in too deep and I don't know how to get myself out of this. And that is a terrifying feeling, which is why ultimately we then get to stage 12, which is just a full collapse. This is physically, mentally, your body, your brain, your heart, your gut, all of it is screaming at you. And it's telling you, hey, I've been telling you for a while that you are setting yourself up to really, really not feel okay. And you weren't listening to me because you kept bottling those emotions and trying to productive your way out of it. Which PS is not real. Being more productive isn't going to stop you from feeling burnt out. It's likely going to get you there faster when you're already experiencing it. You've maybe heard the saying of like people who are like workaholics or are just constantly on the go, have trouble resting, have trouble accepting rest, have trouble accepting help. You may hear people say like, I didn't slow down and so my body forced me to, when like you get sick or something like that. That is a very common example within this demonstration of the stages of burnout. So again, fantastic tool. I really appreciate this. I like seeing the progression. It helps me identify where I'm at. You can do a check-in with yourself using this infographic. And I am hopeful that this helps you better identify things sooner rather than later. Take a breath. I need one too. This is a heavy topic. I mentioned in the very beginning that this is a topic that's very, very, very near and dear to my heart. This is something that I'm very passionate about, and it's also heavy. It's heavy because I know what it feels like. I also understand what it's like to be thrown all of this information at once and be forced to take a look at your cycle and patterns of behavior within stress, burnout, and compassion fatigue, and the just anxiety that can come with that of, am I ever going to be able to make this work sustainable? So take a pause the video again, take a deep breath, do some stretches, maybe some progressive muscle relaxation if that's your jam, get some water, do anything you need to in this moment to care for your physical body, mind, heart, soul. Look at puppy pictures, do whatever you need to do, and we will resume momentarily. All right. I hope that you took a second for yourself, and whatever you chose to do during that break, I hope that it was a little bit refueling for you, or at least recentering and grounding. We're now going to move into how burnout impacts the provider as well as client care. So I've now told you all of the signs, symptoms, stages of burnout, of compassion fatigue, of stress. So now, how does this impact us and our clients? Um, Something that I say a lot to my clients or other providers even is, if you are someone who struggles to take care of yourself and you desperately need to, sometimes you have to trick your brain into caring for yourself, saying that it's because it will benefit others. That is not a long-term solution. I do not want that to be our viewpoint forever. And if you are struggling taking care of yourself and understanding that many of the behaviors that you are either engaging with or not engaging with that are leading to burnout, these things impact others too. And if that is the only way your silly brain can allow you to do better for yourself, is to say, I'm actually doing this because I want to give better client care, that's totally fine. And that is a fantastic starting point until you can convince your brain and unlearn that you are not deserving of rest, that you are not deserving of care, that you are not deserving of a pause, a break, support, a network being held, having space held for you. If you haven't unlearned that you aren't deserving, first of all, you are. Second of all, use the excuse to your brain that you're doing this for someone else, not for you. So these examples might help with that as you're slowly, hopefully, starting to create space for yourself and not just dismiss yourself. So burnout can show up with a lack of connection to your job, and that can lead to making more mistakes, missing important details, falling behind on required tasks like documentation. Missing important details is actually very dangerous in a lot of the work that we do. We have to be incredibly aware of what things are going on for the people that we are working with, the clients that we are serving. You can very easily miss a safety concern if your brain is not on, if you are tuned out and disconnected. That is dangerous. That is dangerous for your client, and it's not appropriate care, because part of our job is to help keep folks safe within the means that we can. So when you are disconnected from your job, you're disconnected from your clients, you're maybe missing some really crucial information. This also shows up in this next example, that client care is less effective because the clinician is emotionally drained and therefore cannot hold space for the client. So this person is sitting with a client and they are thinking about how they still need to go grocery shopping and how they have all these other things to do, or they're not thinking about anything and they're just totally tuned out, like you're present but you're not, you're in autopilot mode. that is not us holding space for our clients. That is us making it through the session or the interaction. And again, that's a survival skill. You're going into survival mode when you're experiencing these things. So what are you needing? What is missing? The therapist is unable to try new modalities and tools when they're in extreme burnout, especially because their brain doesn't have the capacity to try new things. When you're in active burnout, like I was just describing, of that like autopilot mode, absolutely not are you going to be able to try some brand new therapeutic modality, because you're literally doing good enough to make it through the day. The reason that this is comical, it's not, to be clear, but the reason that this makes me giggle a little bit is because so many of us will say, well, I'll just learn how to do something different so that I can fix this feeling. Yes, in a perfect world, but if you're in stage 12, you're not able to do that right now. We need to do that as prevention. When we are unable to learn new tools or try new modalities, we are also maybe not giving the best client care, because our client may be needing something different than what we are well versed in. And that is an awesome part of our jobs, being able to learn and grow continuously through our career. That's not something that everyone gets to say. So when we do not have the capacity to learn, grow, and change, we are not able to show up and give our clients the resources that they need. And then another example is when people are in burnout, they're likely getting sick more often. So they're calling in and missing work more frequently. This leads to client care suffering because they have a lack of consistency in their treatment. It can also really impact the continuity of care. So are other professionals depending upon me to do XYZ with this client so that they can secure housing for themselves, so that they can get gender affirming care, so that they can have XYZ thing? This does not mean that you should work when you are sick. What I am saying here is that burnout leads to additional sickness. You are more susceptible to illness. Your immune system is suffering when you are in burnout, and therefore you're missing work, which then means your clients are being canceled and rescheduled, or the kids at the school you work at don't get to have group that day, or the person that you're taking to Goodwill to pick out new school clothes from the youth shelter that you work at are no longer getting to do that day. That does not mean that you should put all of those things ahead of your own wellness. It just means that we can likely be less sick less often, if we are intentional with our prevention skills and our recovery skills for burnout when this is happening. So we're going to talk next about some tools for preventing therapist and helper burnout. I always like to give a little bit of a disclaimer that everyone watching this video is coming from different backgrounds, different experiences, different work settings, different populations, different caseload expectations, etc. Meaning that there may be things on this list that you are not able to implement within your work and within your setting, and that is okay. Focus on what you can do, because a part of burnout prevention and recovery is bringing back a sense of control to you. And by looking at the things on this list that aren't possible for you, you're going to reiterate that cynicism cycle that we talked about earlier. Again, not an all-encompassing list. Many of people do different things to prevent burnout, but these are some of the most common. So practicing self-care, I mentioned earlier that is not just the fun self-care, that is the boring self-care. If you are not taking care of your very basic human needs, you are automatically setting yourself up for failure when it comes to burnout prevention, because you are already starting out lower than baseline. So first things first, personal self-care, basic. If that's all you can do is basic self-care, please do it. Prioritize your energy in ways that serve you well. 2, leave work at work. Again, not possible for every setting. When it is possible, do it. If you are not on call, do not work outside of work hours when you can help it. If you are not a crisis emergency 24-hour Clinician, have boundaries with your clients on how and when they reach you, and what that looks like, and create those expectations so that your clients know what to do in crisis. And you are also able to not be expected to work every single day, all of the time. Um, Tap into hobbies and passions. What do I love? What do I care about? What brings me joy? What makes me feel warm and fuzzy? What makes me feel rejuvenated and excited? Four, connect with peers for support. It is really helpful to connect with people who understand the work that you do. Being in this field is oftentimes not understood by the average person. The stereotypical things of like, oh, all you do is listen to people talk all day. Like, all you do is like hang out with people. Yes. And in the first hour, I talked about a divorce. In the second hour, I talked about moving to a new city. In the third hour, I talked about grief and loss. In the fourth hour, I talked about a new baby coming. In the fifth hour, I talked about dropping out of college. In the sixth hour, I talked about substance abuse and how to help their partner through that. That is not just chatting. So having people in your life that can be a part of your support network that get it and understand the depths of the work that we do and what it feels like to be burnt out and what it feels like to experience vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, or compassion fatigue, those are your people when it comes to prevention, because they hear you, they get it, they see you. Exercise regularly. What that looks like for your body is your decision. I really appreciate movement that feels good in my body. I appreciate movement in ways that feel soft and slow. There are other people that prefer movement, such as running a marathon. We're different types of people, but we can still both get movement in and exercise and use our body in ways that feel good. Six is making time for family and friends. You saw on the stages of burnout that one of the things that happens closer to stage 12 is starting to distance yourself from family and friends. So prevention is being really intentional about having that time scheduled with family and friends. That also will help you track if you are starting to withdraw more, and you also may have accountability from family and friends when they start noticing. I mentioned this earlier, but setting boundaries with clients, again, this will look different in every single type of job within our field. So for example, if you are a case manager and you work with youth, you likely will have teens reaching out to you all of the time. This is just how it works. They rely on you for a lot of things when you're in a role like that, where you're the one that takes them to the grocery store, and you're the one that helps them pick out clothes for an interview, and you're the one that takes them to open a bank account, and all of the things. Having boundaries and expectations on your available hours is huge. You get to have control and autonomy over what you have your boundaries be with your clients. You are not mean or not doing your job well or uncaring if you have boundaries of, hey, please don't email or text or call me at 11 p.m. Please email me during business hours. Please don't expect a response from me when I'm not in the office. If you are in a crisis, please do not call me because I am not a crisis clinician. Please call 988. Go to your local emergency room. Use your safety plan. Coach your clients on what to do outside of the workday so that those boundaries can be followed easier. Once they know and that expectation is set and understood, especially if it happens from the very beginning of a relationship with a client, it's incredible how much more seamless it can feel. Set your ideal work schedule. This is one that you may not be able to do, and that is okay. Something that you can do, though, is consider scheduling time off ahead of time, scheduling long weekends whenever you can, scheduling time off to go to the doctor, scheduling like within your workday. So I'm coming from the lens of a therapist in this example. I have to be really intentional about what clients I book back to back. This is real important. So if I have a high acuity client, I want to be intentional to not book another high acuity client right after if I can help it. That's not always possible, of course, but if I can create a really good balance in levels of need throughout my schedule and how I schedule clients and how I manage my time, that really has become a very helpful thing for me over the years. Consider your work environment. Or if you're in an environment that doesn't feel safe for you or doesn't feel like aligns with your values or like you have the support that you need, it's okay to consider if that's still a good fit for you. Not every job, agency, boss, work, etc., is going to be a good fit for everyone, and that's why there's so many different options of the type of work we can do in mental health. That's one of my favorite things about being a social worker is I feel like I have limitless options on how I engage with the work that I do. Keep exploring. If you're not sure what your niche is or what feels good to you, keep looking. It's okay. That doesn't mean that your current job is bad. It doesn't mean that you are bad or that you can't handle it because it's too hard. It's none of that. It just means that we are each individual human beings, again, human before helper, and certain things aren't going to work for certain people, and that's okay. Limit your client caseload when possible. This is something that you may have to advocate for. You may have a supervisor who supervises your productivity who isn't doing direct client care anymore. And maybe they struggle to remember what that feels like to have an expectation of seeing a billion people in a week and how it can be really unobtainable sometimes. Ask for that. That ties into working with ideal clients. If you private practice on your own, you get a lot more say in that. Working for group practices, you likely get more say in that. Working for a safety net hospital, you're going to get less say in that because it's going to be crises and acuity and order of safety, and that is not your ideal client to work with and you didn't know until you knew. That's okay. You tried something and it wasn't a fit, and now you have new information to move into your next thing. I rattled off several different environments that I've worked at over my career, and I am incredibly a really big fan, encourager. When I am teaching master's level students, I talk about this a lot of encouraging trying different types of work. I didn't know what I didn't know until I knew. And in fact, now that I am have been in the field for much longer than I was at the time of working at many of those places, I have such a wealth of knowledge that I would not have had if I didn't have the exposure and experiences in those environments that didn't end up being the right fit for me for the long run. So I highly recommend, when possible, to explore options for what type of work you want to be doing, what the environment is like, and what type of clients you're wanting to serve. Because again, you don't know, you may end up loving something that you never expected loving. And I'd hate for you to miss out on that by being afraid to try new things. Number 12, get trained in a new modality. Look, it's under prevention. We already went over this. And then 13 is changing your mindset. This is in my control. It is in my control how much I choose to vent about work. It is in my control how much I choose to work from home after work hours. It is in my control how I view the place that I work, and how I view myself is technically also in my control. Advocating for myself, asking for help, asking for support and guidance. We, as humans, can't expect folks to read our minds. And so if you're struggling in your work, please tell someone. Your boss isn't going to know unless they're told. And you, again, are deserving of support. However, you've got to be brave sometimes and admit that you need it. And a reminder that there's nothing wrong with needing it. And in fact, I encourage it. So that's great. That's great, Jessica. Thank you. Fantastic. But what if I think I'm already burnt out? Have no fear. We're going to talk about recovery next. So, some strategies for burnout recovery. Again, these are, it's kind of like an a la carte menu. You can choose what you want, you can add them all together. You can try one, and if it doesn't work, move to the next. I think for most people, combination, excuse me, of many of these things is going to be the most successful. So, the first one, truthfully, you can't do any of the others before you do this first one. Stop. Just stop. Stop and rest. Pause. Breathe. You don't have to have an answer right now, but you do have to stop and rest. There can be times where burnout gets to an extreme level where recovery on your own is not an option. Just like when we're talking about recovery in any other sense of the word, it's incredibly hard to do by yourself. It is hard to get out of burnout when you are burnt. So there are going to be times where stopping means for some folks taking a leave from their job, or maybe a specific part of their job, or pausing on a new project they just took on, etc. I understand that that's not ideal and that's not what we would like to do. However, sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, your brain, your body, your heart, your gut are going to force you to stop if you won't stop on your own. So just stop and pause. Two, become more grounded. Become more grounded in your purpose. What is your why? Why do you do this work? What is something that keeps you connected to yourself and your work, but also the world around you too? Three, reconnect with your values. I mentioned this in the stages of burnout. What values are you prioritizing, if any? Are you even aware of what values are being prioritized? Or are you just so tuned out and so checked out that you're not valuing anything? Reconnecting with your values can give you a sense of guidance. It can help you make decisions. Are these things aligning with my values? Yes or no? What things can I do to align my work more with my values? Number four is self-awareness and the use of your strengths. I think that one thing I've hopefully driven home for you in this presentation is that your ability to tune in and assess yourself is prevention. So having self-awareness is something that is prevention, and in this case, recovery, because you are self-aware that you're not okay. What are my strengths? I am really good at being solution focused, good at describing how I feel. I am really resourceful. I am good at helping others go through these situations. Use your strengths when you're in burnout, because many of those strengths are going to come natural and aren't going to take a ton of energy and effort, because it's just part of who you are. Number five, goal setting and locus of control. So for this, it's the reminder that you can set goals to change the outcomes. So if you've realized, you know what, maybe this isn't the population I want to work with long term, maybe this isn't the environment I want to work in long term, maybe I do want to go out on my own and start my own practice someday, start goal setting. That's going to help you create that sense of light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to increase hopefulness when you are feeling helpless and out of control. And then locus of control is just the reminder of what is in my control. We are oftentimes focused on what is not in our control. So what is in my control? Draw it out, map it out. I love the donut exercise, is what I call it, where you've got two circles, and in the middle circle, you write things in my control. And in the outside circle, you write things that are not in my control. And if you look at those two things, you are likely pouring in more energy into the things in the I cannot control bucket, trying to control the uncontrollable. Create an ownership mindset. What this means is that you are owning that this is your experience and you are deserving of it feeling better and different. We are not placing blame and projecting on everyone and everything else that is causing problems. We are saying, I am going to own my mindset about this, and I am going to focus on my goals, what is in my control, what my strengths are, what my values are, and I'm going to take ownership of my experience. That in itself can be very, very empowering. Instead of that like submissive, just like, I can't make anything better because nothing will ever change. That mindset is the opposite, I would say, of the ownership mindset. That's much more of like the projection mindset, which in fact perpetuates burnout rather than works on recovering from burnout. Number 7, take your own advice. And I am preaching to the choir. I'm preaching to myself. Like, I get it. I'm fantastic at telling my clients, telling people in the community to focus on self-care and what's in your control and being asking for help and et cetera, et cetera. Still absolutely with some of these, and I struggle with taking my own advice. We have really good advice. Like, do you ever have moments where you're working with someone and you're like, huh, what I just said was like really good and like really insightful? Those are the moments. You give fantastic feedback to others. Use it. Use it. And then 8 is asking for help. Again, everyone should have a therapist. Therapy is magic. Whether you are a therapist or not, having someone that you can go to help process and work through these emotions is fantastic. You do not have to do it alone. That was a lot of information. I am really hopeful that this was helpful for you, that there were takeaways, that you learned something new, and at the bare minimum, that you are feeling a little bit more tuned into yourself and where you're at right now. I really would like to encourage you to pick something that you want to focus your energy on that's a little different than where you've been focusing it on before. So maybe that's getting better with that basic, boring self-care. Maybe that's just affirming yourself that you are good at what you do and it's okay that you're tired. Maybe it's allowing yourself to explore other career opportunities for the future while you're making those future goals and plans. Maybe it's allowing yourself to dream about what things would be like if some of the things that our clients face weren't issues. I just want to encourage you to leave this feeling informed, not defeated. If you have any questions for me or for Resolve, you can shoot us an email. So this first email here is our one of our admin specialists who can answer just about any question, can get people scheduled, et cetera, et cetera. This second email is my personal personal work email. If you have direct questions for me about the work that I do or any of the content today, it's jessica@kcresolve.com. I love to hear from people that I do trainings for in the community, and this is a great way to connect. That is our phone number, and then our website, kcresolve.com. We have, as a reminder, 3 locations. We have providers in Prairie Village, Parkville, and Lee Summit. We are open 7 days a week and have a wide variety of clinicians that specialize in many different things. Feel free to check out their bios on the website. And here's your references. And that's all. That is all. So thank you so much again for being here. We are very excited to have another year of CARE4U2. This is the 8th annual. So thanks for continuing to support us, supporting you.